right, everybody. Welcome to UkeTV episode number 9. Today we're doing a behind the artist episode with Andrew Molina. Andrew, how you doing, buddy?
Hey Mike, how's it going, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet, bro. It's funny. I just saw you. What, 3 days ago? Is it about that we just connected up?
Yeah, we went to Zippy's. We had some lunch and then I took you back to the airport, but it was a good time. I know you had a blast in Japan when you were there in Korea.
Oh man, yeah, that was insane. It was exhausting, but uh, but it was so good. I mean, the interest in ukulele and actually overall Hawaiian culture. So, people were excited not just about the ukulele music and the ukes themselves, but also we were fortunate enough to have both in Tokyo and in Korea, actually, and even in um, I just drew a blank on the university Yamaguchi. Whew, that took me a second. In Yamaguchi, we were at a university and we did a session there, and we had hula dancers from different halaus at
Oh,
every one of these sessions. So we not only had the custom ukes and quality ukes there, we had some luthiers there, and we had Uncle Kimo and some other artists, but we also had the hula dancers. So we had this really sort of complete Hawaiian essence there. And so, yeah, people were just in love with it. They were just fascinated by the whole thing. The crowds were great. Even in Korea, where ukulele and Hawaiian stuff is still, I don't know if I want to call it new, but like the passion for it hasn't developed quite as much yet as it has in Japan. But there was definite interest there. We had a pretty large crowd of people.
nice.
So it was pretty cool. So anyway, but yeah, no, it was great to get a little bit of local food with you. Ate some chili moco and talk story and stuff. So I appreciate you being on the episode today, though, bud.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for folks that don't know, we had you on the very first Uke TV episode in what is sort of a historic getting together of people to talk ukulele. It still boggles my mind that we had the six of you in that episode. But I think one of the things that we obviously weren't able to get to for each and every person was sort of the background and the history of sort of how each of you got going in playing ukulele. So I think that's where I'd love to just start off today is how did you get going? Like what sort of drew you to ukulele at whatever point in your life that was?
So, I mean, growing up in Hawaii, ukulele is everywhere, right? I
Sure.
always tell everyone, like when I do workshops and stuff, that it's kind of like on the mainland, it's like what a piano is. A lot of households have them and people just kind of overlook them. And so, like, I never really appreciated it for what it was. I just saw it as like an heirloom of some sort. And I know that my
Mhm.
grandma had a kamaka from the 60s that my mom actually bought from Long's, apparently for like 18 bucks with
Are you kidding me?
for my grandma's birthday. And I just can't believe it because I know how the prices are now. But apparently, they bought that for my grandma as a gift, and she just kept it in her closet. So as a kid, about like maybe 9 or 10 years old, I would ask to play it, and my grandpa had nothing to do with that, and he's just like, "There's no way you're touching this expensive ukulele." So I always knew it was in there, but it wasn't until I think I was just about to turn 13, a couple months before that, and one of my friends, he came over and he brought his ukulele over after school because he used to play. I think he had class, and he just started to learn some songs, and so he brought it over one day, and then my grandma went to the closet, brought out her uke, and said, "Okay, why don't you learn from him?" So I said, "Okay," and I learned my first song with, like, I think it was "Honey Baby," the name of the song, key of A, and then I was like, "Wow, this is pretty cool." And then my mom showed me some finger style picking thing that she did, and so he would come over every Friday and we would practice together. And it was very, grew up in Hawaii. There's not so much focus in the theory, so it's literally like, oh, just copy my fingers here. This is, you got the basic F and C and all that stuff, but it was very like informal. It was just press.
Right.
That's where that term kind of comes from. And then my cousin Jonah, he was taking ukulele class at Kamehameha. So they were getting into picking, and it was more advanced kind of stuff than my friend was doing. So he started coming over and started showing me some of the Cow Crater Boys, Troy Fernandez, and all that. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And kind of that Hawaiian style was kind of my hobby that I was doing for my first maybe 5 months. And of course, it all changed when my dad asked me the question, you know a guy named Jake Shimabukuro? And I said, and just by hearing that name, like I thought it was like an 80-year-old Japanese guy that lived in Japan who played maybe some jazz, sat in a chair. That's the face that came to mind. I was like, oh, I haven't heard of that guy, but he's like, yeah, that's the best guy in the world. I was like, okay. And then I think it was a couple weeks later, me and my mom went into a bookstore because I needed a book for my book report, and we heard an arrangement of My Heart Will Go On. And I was like, who is that? And then the lady's like, oh, it's Jake Shimabukuro. I'm like, oh, it's that guy. And when we looked him up, it wasn't an 80-year-old guy. It was like a 27-year-old, like not kid, but young guy. And when I saw his performance, like footage, I was like, wow, that is so cool. Because I never had seen ukulele in that context. It was usually
Right.
like a luau background instrument. So he's the guy who kind of made the ukulele like badass for me. I was like, wow, that's really. And then after I saw him in concert live, I was just like, wow, I want to do that. And I just listened to all his CDs religiously. I started teaching myself how to play his songs by just listening to the CD player over and over. And I was taking ukulele class, but in no time, kind of like Chris Fujigami says, like we couldn't learn much after that. It was just us teaching ourselves and that dedication and that drive. And I tried to get my classmates to like, oh, come on, let's play While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and everyone was like, oh, it's too hard. I'm like, no, it's not. And that's the only thing. That's the only difference of of how I progress is that I never saw it as being too hard. I saw it as a challenge, and I'm like, I'm gonna play like that. I told myself I'm gonna do that when I grow up, and I just stuck to that vision. But that's kind of how it all started, man. And I really appreciate Jake for that influence. And
Well, and
it's been an incredible
I think
journey.
that so absolutely, and I think a couple things you talked about that I want to make sure people understand. You weren't. First of all, we're talking back in an era where there weren't as many like music books in terms of like now you can go on to Jake's website and you can buy a book for every one of his albums
Yeah.
that has like all the tabs and musical notes and things like that. But or you could now go online and go Google it and find them as well.
Yeah.
You didn't have that stuff back then.
Yeah. And I couldn't read it anyway.
Well, that's true because you definitely were not definitely not the book learner of ukulele.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think
Definitely not.
there were a lot of people though. Even we talked about it back, in our recording session, and it was even more so for Jake himself when he learned, or Herboda Jr. or Brian Tolentino, the folks of that age, where there literally was not an internet for any of this stuff. You had to learn from whether it was vinyl or cassette or CD. That's how you learned, was you played the music and you had to you did it over and over and over until you kind of figured out, what it was that they were playing, how they were playing it. And
Right.
and that's, you were talking about, I listened to Jake's CD over and over until I got it. I mean, I want people to understand that, this wasn't I went and grabbed the tab sheets for,
No.
Jake's stuff and then figured it out.
No, and I remember my dad even told me, like, as I went into the 8th grade, he was just like, he would listen to the records over and over, and that's how he developed his ear. And he used to tell me, I know you're frustrated because you're trying to find these chords because they're really, he's doing these extensions, not your typical A minor, F, G chords. And I mean, there was video footage, but like sometimes you saw the back of the neck. Sometimes you just saw him go like higher up on the fretboard. Plus, he had no dots, so it's just like I don't know what the hell he's doing. But
Right.
I had a basic region, and finding one chord was so satisfying. I was like, that's it. And so there was a small group of us where we would share our notes and like, is this the right chord? I think that sounds a little off. But eventually we get it. But yeah, no, I really attribute my ear to those early days, and it's pretty crazy because that took me to the level of producing 2 albums without knowing any music theory. I could hear how things were formed, but I didn't understand it until 2016, and that's why I had such a trouble teaching up until then, because I didn't really know how to explain things. It was literally just, oh, put your finger there and all that. But yeah, the theory came in handy for sure after that.
Yeah, but I think the interesting thing about it was you were starting to play before, you sort of, some people might say you sort of put the cart before the horse, right? You started learning how to play and then you figured out the theory.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. And
Where a
that's
lot of people are
because-
like, oh, you got to learn the theory. You got to learn the theory first, and then
Yeah.
you can learn how to play. And so, talk about that a little bit about, sort of your philosophy on it, because you're not, the only one, and especially I think coming from Hawaii, I know there's others that we've talked to. Jonah Davis, Kimo Hussey, obviously one of the guys, but he's
Yeah.
very much about ear listening, ear training.
Yeah, for me it was, and it was the first time that I actually had a passion for something. Because prior to that, my mom tried to put me in tennis and all these different sports, and it wasn't for me. But I think once I heard Jake and I started getting momentum, I was like, and I knew what I wanted, then I started to get obsessed in tunnel vision over what I wanted to learn. So like, and I would select his hardest songs. I'm like, okay, by 8th grade, I want to have these songs ready, so like I can show my full arsenal. Like if it was Spain that he does, or like Orange World, or some of his ridiculous pieces, and a lot of times I have some footage I'm gonna have to show one day. But it's of me trying to play like Wama Guitar Jane Luis, but the middle section is just missing. But I was just so hungry to put it together that I forced myself. And like listening back, I'm like, but I gotta give myself for trying, because I didn't give up.
Right.
I didn't care that it sounded bad, but I just pushed through so hard because I wanted that so bad. And eventually the chords started coming together. So it was very
Yeah.
shoddy work, like the template I was using, but I just persisted and it started coming together. And that can go to anyone who's trying hard. It's when you have the mindset of like, oh, again, if it's too hard or this is too much of a task and you don't give your chance, but you have to start somewhere, and it started getting easier and easier and easier. But yeah, I would have to say it was just my mindset and attitude that kind of helped me progress, because it took a lot. I would spend hours trying to figure out this song called Third Stream. It was one of his most technical pieces, and when I was in class, I actually asked him at a performance, how do you do that technique? So he was telling me it was you rotate between the middle and your thumb. So I would actually practice it on the desk in school, and my teachers were like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm just like, "I'm trying to practice a technique, and then I'm just practicing it on the side of the desk." But that's how hungry I was, and lunchtime was dedicated to ukulele. My teachers saw the passion that I had, so even like they would let me finish my work early and practice in the back. They said, as long as you're not disrupting the class, and it
Wow,
was kind of cool. And
that is cool.
I probably mentioned this before, but I was a very shy kid before the ukulele. Like I hated book reports. I could never speak in front of a group. I just was so self-conscious. And that all changed when I found the ukulele. It just completely brought me out of my shell. And that biggest transformation probably happened around middle school, because my 6th grade teachers were like, who is this kid? Like we couldn't get you to say a word, and now like you won't be quiet.
It's amazing, it's amazing how this little tiny 4-string instrument has changed so many
Yeah.
people's lives in different ways, right? Like, you talk about brought you out of your shell.
Yeah.
Mine was always about, or has and continues to be around, stress, depression, anxiety, that kind of thing. There's all sorts of, there's other people that, they've started playing ukulele because of the, troubles at home that they've had. And, it was a way to sort of get them away from that. And, it's amazing what this little tiny instrument can do, and the smiles that it can bring.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a very happy instrument, and like people, like you said, people use it for different purposes. For me, it actually helped me find my purpose, and I think that's why I was so happy after that, because I was like, I kind of knew the direction I wanted to go, and then it just has a crazy effect on people. Like, we know the ukulele community, everyone's pretty happy in there, and
oh
it's
yeah.
a very, everyone's very supportive of the artists. It's like if you play ukulele, you're automatically part of the club. There's no it's not like guitar. It's not really cutthroat. So that's the thing I like about the ukulele community, is that everyone's super welcoming. Even people I've never met face to face in person, I know them over Instagram or Facebook or whatever, but everyone is just like, yeah, it. More people should be like that in the world.
Well, like you said, you asked Jake, "Oh, how did you do that thing?" And he said, "Oh, it's, the my middle finger and thumb, alternating."
Yeah.
You go back to like guitar, and if you try to ask, certain players, I think once certain people hit a certain level, like once, like, I know pros, you'll see like documentaries where pros talk to pros and they'll ask these questions and they
Mm-hmm.
share, but it on the whole, I find that people are much more protective of their little tricks and secrets that they do. It's like, oh, it's like, they kind of are more of the magician. Like, I'm not going to show you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not going to show you my trick. But in ukulele, yeah, it's, I've been mind blown by the amount of sharing and giving that it is. And I think, it's come back in, probably, we're in episode 9, probably out of, it's probably come back in at least 7 or 8 out of the 9 episodes, where a lot of it comes back to that Hawaiian culture, that this sharing and giving and everything else, it really does kind of come back to where this instrument is rooted, because, it's probably a lot of how your life as a kid and a family has grown up. It's, that's kind of how it is, ohana and aloha, and
Mm-hmm.
that spirit.
Yeah, and I was very shocked when he actually told me. I wasn't sure if he was going to tell me, so I just figured I'd ask, because he seemed like a super nice guy, and it took 2 hours to get to him in the line, but it was totally worth it for like 30 seconds and a little bit of advice. I still can't do the technique, by the way, so I just created my own version.
But that makes you unique, right? It's
Yeah,
not, you're not trying to be a Jake clone. You're trying
yeah,
to take influences and pieces of it, and then, how does that apply to Andrew Molina?
exactly.
Um, One other thing I wanted to go back to, because I think this is such a critical point that people forget, especially nowadays in this day and age. You talked about how, you looked at that video of you trying to play While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and there was some stuff that was kind of shoddy on it and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but you kept listening, you kept playing, you kept trying. You were doing it at lunch, you were doing it at, in the back of the classroom, wherever you were able to do it, whenever you were able to do it, you were really working on learning how to play this instrument, and you were doing it in a way that, without the tools that a lot of us have today. And
Yeah,
I think that's the one of the things that, you know um, is a little bit more of my era, your era, the older eras, is the determination and the
mm-hmm.
dedication to being able to do it. I think, nowadays people want everything to come so easy to them, and they're so quick to give up. It's like, oh, I'm not getting it. I'm not getting this chord. I can't do it. I can't play. You know, and for those that don't know, I'm actually a student of Andrew's, and we'll talk about the main topic coming up. But like in some stuff I've done with him, there's some things that, he's worked on teaching me, and some others, and you get some people that are just like, I can't do this. I'm
Yeah,
giving up, and I will be the first to say it's not easy. But I think people people are too quick to just give up on it, and I think they think that people like Jake, people like you, people like Taimane, these names that they know, I think that there are people out there that think that this stuff just came to you guys, like
yeah.
that you guys are just these like prodigies that, out of nowhere, you just all of a sudden magically picked up a uke one day, and you guys were like, able to just blow everyone's minds.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good point that you brought up. And we had very limited resources. And like you said today, there's a lot of resources, but a lot of people want the instant gratification. And I think sometimes when you don't have a lot of resources, it actually makes you stronger. And I think that was our case. Me, Chris Fujigami, Aldrine, I think we were so limited, but we were so determined and so inspired. You know, we forced ourselves to be creative and forced ourselves to listen. And yeah, it's kind of strange because even like when I give lessons now, or when I talk to some aspiring ukulele players, and they hit these blocks, just like, I don't know if I can do this, and I'm just thinking, I would think it'd be easier now, but maybe it is that whole thing we just talked about, of the instant gratification of certain, because like ukulele is easy to learn, but it's very hard to master.
Yeah,
On
sure.
day one you can play like, what does Jake say? You can play like 100 Hawaiian songs with 3 chords and stuff like that.
Yep. Yep.
But like to master it and build your vocabulary and all this, like it takes a while. And going to what you said, it I don't feel like I was talented. I just felt like I was extremely determined. That's, like I said, that's what kind of separated me from my class, was that it all started with my mindset of, I don't care how hard this is gonna be. I'm gonna do my best to learn it, and I will learn it. It was never can I learn it. It was always a
Right.
definiteness, because I knew what I needed to do and I knew what I wanted to do. But it took a lot of hard work. I was Corey is talented. Corey Fujimoto, that guy is talented. But
He
I'm
is
just a hard
talented.
worker. Yes, and it's funny. Me and Clay always ask him, "Hey, how do you do that?" Oh, you just do a couple hammer-ons. I'm just like, dude,
Sure.
that's not what you're doing. I don't know what the hell he's doing, but yeah, it's a lot of hard work. A lot of hours went into this, and yeah, and an open mind.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um, so let's it'll be related to folks once we kind of get along in this, but let's talk about another area of your world that I don't know how many people actually know, but um, you're actually very much also into jiu-jitsu.
Yes, yeah.
So, um, talk about that a little bit. Like, how did you actually, most, I guess, I don't know, I'm not going to say this statistically, but, I know at least for my age, a lot of kids either went to like karate or taekwondo were probably like the two most common that people went to. How did you find jiu-jitsu and kind of how did you get going with that?
Well, actually, my he's like one of my best friends, and he was actually my roommate in college. But he started doing it, and he was a white belt at the time. He actually just got his black belt like
Oh,
a
wow.
few days ago, and he gave the number one grappler in Japan like a huge competition. Like he's gotten to such a huge level, and that's inspiring for me. But
Yeah.
back in the day, we were, yeah, I think I was just, we were going to the gym, and then he started doing jujitsu. And then, I was trying to do P90X in the room, and I'm like, oh, this sucks. I did it for 3 days, and then he's like, why don't you come roll with us? So I said, okay. And it was tough the first few, I've been super inconsistent because this was about a decade ago. And I kind of got into it maybe for a good couple years, and then at the time he got his blue and eventually got his purple. But it was kind of like it was a like, not a love hate, but a like hate relationship with jujitsu. And I would do it here and there, and then I'm like, when is it gonna come where I get this passion? Because I know the passion for ukulele, and I'm thinking, when is it
Right.
gonna arrive for jujitsu? So I just kind of stuck it out there, and then I started traveling, so I had to stop. So very on and off, but it
Hmm.
was it was something, a part of my life, for a while now. But I would say just at the end of 2021 is when I guess I'm fully committed now. And I've been training with him and some of our team here in Maui, and it's just been an incredible journey. And so now my passion is fully like ukulele now, and fully invested in it. I just competed in April,
Yep.
and yeah, that pushed me to get even better. So yeah, and then now sometimes I even help my friend assist some of the new white belts at his gym. But it's definitely a part of my life now. So it's my second passion.
That's awesome. So it was really kind of coming out of the pandemic that you sort of really sort of dove in fully to it.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy because again, like before that, it was training like maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks, you know.
Mm.
But I could say I wasn't fully committed. But yeah, once the end of the pandemic, and that was another break too. The pandemic I couldn't really roll, so I had to take
Right.
2 years off there too as well almost. And then right
Yep.
at the end, you know, and then that's when I got, dude, I was like 182 at the time. And so like, and then going up a flight of stairs, like I was started to bog a little bit. I'm like, okay, this is not good. So that's when I started fully training again. Now I think I'm around 155. So
Wow.
yeah, it all happened because of that. And then yeah, after that, I just been riding this momentum, just trying to hone my skills. And I love the chess match aspect of it. And it's cool because I'm meeting actually quite a few jiu-jitsu practitioners through ukulele. Some of them are my students, and it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So like, you know, how would you say, your jujitsu, and maybe it's one way or the other, but I'll start it with this direction. How would you say your jujitsu training, or, any of the philosophies or things you're learning there, sort of translate or have enhanced or helped, whether it's your ukulele playing or your ukulele teaching? How
Well,
has jujitsu influenced the ukulele side of your life?
well, actually, the ukulele side influenced my jujitsu side of life.
Oh, okay. All right.
So,
All
so
right.
like,
So it's the other way.
yeah. So, well, I mean, they kind of complement each other, but like,
Sure.
but because of the pandemic, that's why I started teaching. I didn't teach before.
Right.
I would do
Right.
these workshops here and there, but I really got a passion for teaching through the pandemic. And so now, when I explain, like, I've learned how to hone those skills as a teacher, as a ukulele, I guess, mentor. So the way I explain techniques in jiu-jitsu is very similar to like how I showed in ukulele. So like how I'll
Got it.
explain certain things to you, concepts, I'll have that same exact patience. I'll demonstrate a couple mechanics, and then I'll apply that to ukulele. But the parallel that's very interesting with ukulele and jiu-jitsu is like jiu-jitsu, you start the same position every time, but the role is never the same. It's like playing a song, right? Or improvising.
Right.
The same chords come up, but every time it's a different journey, and that's what's so fascinating. And that's where I see there's very parallels to the two arts. But
Yeah.
you have to think on the spot. You have to improvise in certain situations, and yeah, no role or no song will ever be duplicated twice. And so
Yep.
it really
Yep.
forces the creative mind, and that's what I love about both.
No, it's true, and you kind of talk about also, strategy. It's not going to be the same. The even if you're rolling or going against the same person, or when you're going against different people, it's not always going to be the exact same. And it's kind of the same when you're getting into, you brought it up, like improvising. It's kind of the same if you're sitting down into a kind of capilla, or you're sitting down to jam
Yeah.
with some other folks. You got to very quickly be able to look and see what they're doing, even if they tell you the key they're playing in. You're kind of looking at the fingers and kind of trying to figure out what are they doing, and how do I insert myself into this to be able to hold on. It's the same kind of thing. You're evaluating very quickly this other person. How are they positioning themselves? How are they moving around early on to figure out how is it that you're going to go and try and attack that.
Yeah, you have to be observant, and you have to listen. What's going on. Well, listen more for ukulele. For jiu-jitsu, it's more feel. But yeah,
Yep.
you have to be very aware of what's going on, or you're gonna get swept in jiu-jitsu, or you're gonna hit a wrong note in ukulele.
So kind of bringing those things together, I know you've been teaching for a number of years now. I took actually my very first lesson from you. That's how you and I met.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
2019. For folks that don't know, I go to Maui every year with my family, and I was on Oahu in 2019, talking to Isaac Peters, who runs Ukulele Lab and does a lot of work with Herb Oda Jr. and does some stuff with Jake Shimabukuro too. So I was talking with him. I was at his shop, and I said, "Hey, man, I'd love to. I had just started playing in 2018, so I really wasn't doing much, but I loved it. And I said, man, I'm going to be in Maui for a whole week. I would love to take a lesson. Who do you know that teaches over there?" And he said, I don't really know any teachers, but I know this guy I know an artist named Andrew Molina that's over there. So I'm happy to reach out to him and ask him if he teaches. And little did I know that you weren't really teaching that much yet.
No, that's for
But
sure.
he connected us, and we met outside a Safeway in Kihei, and sat down at one of the tables, one of the picnic tables out there, and did an hour lesson. And I think you basically focused, if I remember right, you focused me on 3 chords. I can't remember exactly which ones they were. They were probably, some offshoot of C, F, and G.
Yeah, with the
But
A minor,
you were
maybe.
maybe an A minor, and you were mostly teaching me down up 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 or down up up down. I think was pretty much what you were focusing me on, was just some basic strumming, which was fine. I didn't really need much back then. I knew nothing, but that's where it started. And then the pandemic came along, and you were teaching, and so, man, when was it that the Andrew Molina, like the Ukulele Academy, first launched? When did you first launch that full set
I
of
think it was
classes?
the end of 2021, and then I saw you at the Tacoma Festival
Right around that time.
because you were
That's right.
shooting photos, and
Mm-hmm.
then I think you signed up for the school, and then after that we just kind of connected, and we talked story here and there, and then that's when I invited you to be part of my beta group for my new program.
That's right. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that. You had this Andrew Molina Ukulele Academy, which still exists,
Yeah.
but it's a constantly evolving thing. But it was really sort of 2 packages. One, you pay this fee, and you got access to a whole slew of lessons that you had, like these 2 to 3 minute videos, and then you would, go practice them. Or you could pay a little bit more, or a chunk more, and that included some one-on-ones
Yeah.
through like Zoom sessions. And as you and I were talking about it on, like, how I was a customer, but then you and I would just talk story and talk business, and talk about the challenges you were having, and it was like, how can we take this thing and make it into to really something that will take off, and sort of build some of that accountability and some of that drive to really commit to actually taking these lessons. And so let's talk about, and I'll leave it to you to really bring it out, but let's talk about where this sort of thing evolved, and what this new venture is.
Exactly. So with the normal academy, that's kind of a very self-directed learner kind of approach. Like if you don't need any one-on-one, it's essentially a library of you can come in at any level, and you can look over theory, techniques, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we needed something that was more involving with me, and also had a little bit more accountability. So I was
Hmm.
thinking, how can I put my two passions together? And so that's when I came up with, actually I have to give it to one of my students. He actually came up with the name Casey, but we named it Uke-Jitsu, and that literally makes sense because it means ukulele technique in
Yep.
Japanese, you
Yep.
would say. So
Right.
Uke-Jitsu is a 4-step program of honing essential skills. So the first level will have pretty much foundational skills, like strumming, picking, a little bit of theory, some fretboard memorization. And when you feel like you're ready, then you'll get awarded a blue belt, or in this case, a blue strap that you can wear on your ukulele. Like right there.
There it is. Yeah.
And so this is my way of fusing my two passions together. But you have 4 ranks going on: blue, purple, brown, and black, and they will get harder after every level. But yeah, I think we had a great time with our beta group, and I'm excited to share it with the world. We have our next one coming up in about a week now. And yeah, if anyone's interested, we will have a new blue class in 2024.
Yeah, so I'll make sure that all the links to this stuff are in the description for the YouTube episode. What's the best link for them to find information about
You can go to
Uke-Jitsu?
ukejitsu.com.
Perfect, very
Yeah,
easy.
yeah. And
Yeah,
essentially,
so
sorry, I
oh,
was
go
gonna
ahead,
say
go
I
ahead.
didn't even talk about like how it works, but yeah. So what I do is I take a class of we're trying to get a class of 12 to 15. We meet over Zoom every 2 weeks, and that's kind of like our dojo, right? Everyone, when you get promoted, wear your belt to class, and we'll meet every 2 weeks there. In addition, the students will get one-on-ones with either me or one of our purple belts, and we meet pretty much. So that's once a week if you get a group or individual lesson for the remainder of the program, which is probably typically 2.5 months for blue, and then after that, when you're ready to test, you can take your test, and you're allowed one makeup just in case you fail. But if you put in the work, then you shouldn't be worried. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting concept, and yeah, and people have really skyrocketed their progress.
Yeah, I think some of this came from the conversation you and I had, which is where we kind of got into this whole strap thing. Was we were talking about how do we get people? One of the things that sometimes happens with self learners, you get some people that like that's how they are, and it's great, and that's any education program out there. Some people can just take a set of content and they're just off on their own, and that's fine. But
Right.
some people just can't. They just can't get their brains to focus and really carry through all the way, um, purely with self-learning. And so what we were trying to figure out is, how do we chunk this up, and how do we, there's the accountability. You can do that by peer pressure and things like that. But one thing that people always, I've learned from just all my years working in corporate world was, man, you put some sort of item out there that people can obtain, some free thing that, and people just, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter what their financial status is or whatever it is, like they get locked on this thing. And that's where this whole notion of the straps came about, was where you and I were talking about, like, how would we break this whole thing down. And we started coming up with this idea of, like, man, people wear the straps, you get the belt for any kind of martial art. So
Yeah.
if people aren't familiar with jiu-jitsu, you get it for karate or taekwondo, any of those. And we were like, man, we should do straps. And there's just something about that completion part where you just you're headed towards this completion factor, and then if you pass this thing, you get some sort of reward for it. So again, like in kids with sports, you get a trophy. Same thing here. It's like, if I earn this, I earn this strap. And
Right.
it is not easy. I mean, this is my blue strap, and I'm in the process of getting my purple. But like, this was not an easy thing, and especially for somebody that struggles with anxiety, I will tell you, like, sitting down with Andrew in that one-on-one to take that test, I did have to go a second time to pass one part of it, because I struggle with the anxiety of playing in front of other people. But that's the cool thing, is Andrew really took it a step back, saw where my struggles were, and worked through. So the goal here is not to have anybody fail. The goal really is to give people that amount of time and give people the tools that they need. And through the one-on-ones and the group lessons, working with others, is everybody's so supportive. It's like, that's the goal. But adding this in, it just really does add that additional layer of drive for people, because it's like, I want to have this on my uke. I want
Yeah.
to be able to wear this strap on my uke, with this logo on it. You can't find these anywhere. They basically sit at my house and your house,
Yeah.
ready to ship out to people,
much.
and that's it.
Yeah, and the reward with with the accountability factors, I think we're gonna get the most results. Because like I said, we don't give out belts. It would be a failure on me if everyone graduated with a black belt. So it's gonna get challenging, but you can do it if you really push yourself. And because everyone has strengths and weaknesses. So this is kind of gonna make you a well-rounded player. Like I said, theory. It can be fretboard, it can be chord vocabulary, but we touch upon all that kind of stuff. And just from what I've seen from you guys have increased 100%, in skill and knowledge and all that stuff. So, yeah, very exciting.
So talk about the so you said it's a four-part class, or four course program.
Yeah.
Talk about what those four levels are.
Yeah.
And
So
maybe
blue,
talk about each one, about kind of what yeah, kind of what you focus on in each one.
Okay. So blue is building a strong foundation. Like I said, the first thing out of the gate, which a lot of people avoid, is fretboard memorization. But the fretboard is your map. It can become such a useful map once you know the notes on there. And I'm not going to present it on that sheet of paper which everyone sees in a music store, right? Like a million notes on the fretboard. We're going to take it step by step and slowly grow that knowledge. So we have that. We also have your essential strumming and pickings. We have a little bit of metronome practice for timing. And so blue builds, yeah, I know how much you loved it.
I think everybody feels that way, but it's so critical.
Yeah.
It's so critical.
Yeah, and then ear training. Oh, my favorite. I love that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I throw a little bit of ear training modules in there because it's that's a very, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, that ear training is when it can be one of your sharpest tools. So I kind of introduce that in there. Purple belt, we kind of get into more advanced picking. So I introduce hyper picking. It's kind of one of my favorite techniques. In addition to having a pretty complete chord vocabulary by the time you get your purple. So you're able to summon all your majors, your minors, dominant 7 chords, minor 7 chords. So like if I ask you to play along, you can fully complement using different voicings, and that's pretty much purple. Brown, this is brown and black. That's when we start to get a little into the advanced area. So really advanced techniques, even more ear training, and eventually, probably towards black, we'll get into arranging and songwriting. But yeah, it's gonna brush up on all those different aspects just to another level.
Yeah, I can. I mean, it's been super challenging through purple. I know brown and black are getting intense, but it's no, when I say these things, I don't want people to ever feel like, oh, I can't do it. That's not the point. Like, yeah. if you've passed your blue, you can become a purple.
Yeah.
It's going to get harder, but you can do it. If you've passed your purple, there's no reason you can't go through the brown process and get your brown belt. It's just going to get harder every time, but it's no different than any other type of program you try and do. Mm-hmm. Whether that's ukulele, like going over to other programs people know, like James Hill's Academy, like his stuff as it progresses doesn't get easier, it gets harder.
Of course.
Right? And same thing with an athletic type thing, whether it's jiu-jitsu, karate, taekwondo, any of that. Those belts, I did taekwondo as a kid, so I did white belt, and then you were trying to earn your yellow belt. I never actually ended up earning my yellow belt. I was one of the people that actually ended up just giving up on it, and I always regretted it. And it was only because of my own self. It had nothing to do with the dojo or anything else. And I think, it's not supposed to be easy. It's meant to challenge you. But coming out of it, the satisfaction you get of going, man, I did all these challenges, but I am so, passing your blue belt, man, I've got so much foundational knowledge. Yeah. And then, purple belt, you've just got some of those, you kind of layer on top of that. And now brown, it's going to be super exciting to see where this goes for folks. Yeah. And then talk about, I know you've got some plans for brown and black in terms of not just having you be the primary sort of lecturer or driver. You talked a little bit about having purple strap people that have got their purple straps helping with the blues. Talk a little bit about who you're, the types of folks you're looking at having come in and sort of, I guess, guest lecture for some of the brown and black stuff.
Yeah, so for brown and black, I have a lot of ukulele friends out there, like Aldrin Guerrero, Jake Shimabukuro, and eventually, once we get to the high level, I will have them as guests. I guess you could say advisors or guests, just guest teachers that are gonna come in and maybe focus on, like Aldrin's good at songwriting, so maybe I'll have him during a songwriting session in brown or black whenever we do it. But yeah, we're gonna have some nice guests for everyone to enjoy and get some knowledge from. Even I'm gonna learn something too, so it's gonna be lots of fun. But that's something we will definitely have. It's guest instructors.
Yeah, it's funny because all the names you've mentioned, they all know about this program. You started talking a little bit about it back in, I guess it was February when we were all on Oahu, and we talked about it. You teased it a little bit in the very first UkeTV episode. You also talked about it at the ukulele site, Andrew Katakis's podcast. Talked about there, and it's really funny. I've been around you a number of times where you've brought it up to people, and almost every time, even like amazing players like Corey and Calais and those guys, I think Brittany Paiva mentioned it at the first UkeTV episode. You get all these people like, I want to join that. Like, that sounds really cool. Like, I want to do it. And of course, these are people that are already, you know, they would be black belts, right? You know, Corey and Calais and Brittany and Jake and all them would all, you know, have their black belt, in some cases black belt plus. But it's really funny. I think people hear about just the nature of the program, and they're like, they want to be part of it in some way, shape, or form, which is really cool. Like, the response has been so good.
Yeah, it's you know, it's what we want to create here. We want to create something a little unique, a reward system, accountability, but then also reward them not with a belt, but for their hard work. So that's why I want to bring these amazing ukulele players to help inspire the group that we're overseeing, and also creates a community. You know, everyone in their class will become close. You know, even though we're going to be living in different states. You know, I mean, you've kind of formed the Ohana bond with our class so far. And,
exactly.
You know, you're going to be with these people from blue, and not everyone's going to make it to black, but the ones who do, you guys will probably know each other forever. Because it's
I mean,
very...
it is, yeah. Go ahead and finish. I mean,
no, I was going to say, it's just a very involving process.
Yeah, well, it's like you were throwing out some names earlier on, like you and Chris Fuchigami and Aldrin Guerrero, and you know, and even Jake, even though like there's age difference there, but like there is this, those of you that kind of come up in the same sort of era almost, you know, you have this camaraderie amongst you guys. Like, I know you guys go to festivals and perform or teach with each other, and there's something kind of about where, like, if you came up in that same era, you guys have this bond that's sort of forever. And it's the same thing with, I think, with this, and I think even in martial arts it's a similar thing too. Those of you that kind of go through and earn your different levels of belts together, you do form this sort of, you know, bond if you stay with that sport. And same thing with this ukulele. It does happen.
Yeah, and for you to get, you know, full potential out of this is, you always have to be a student and keep an open mind. Always be willing to learn, you know. The moment you think you know everything is the moment you can no longer learn. So that's the only requirements, is have an open mind, and you'll be just fine, I believe.
So speaking of requirements, taking this all the way back for those that are interested in starting this out with their blue strap, you know, can anybody that literally has just bought an ukulele or has no experience, you know, do you feel like those folks can come right in and join blue, or is there, you know, some level of some basics that you should have before you would even want to start going down this route?
I mean, we talked about having like a white belt essentials, but I do start pretty basic at the beginning. It depends, like, how quick they learn, but we start pretty simple, from like holding your ukulele, you know, to your basic strumming. So I think people could jump in if they want, but then maybe we'll have an optional white belt essentials, maybe of course for people to check out that are really like from the ground up, because it will move. I mean, we're in there for a couple months, 2.5 months maybe. So if they feel like that's too fast to like start going from holding your ukulele all the way to using a metronome and playing a piece using 3-finger picking, maybe you want to take the essentials first.
Right.
But
right.
yeah, so I guess it depends on the individual, but we'll have a white belt option for sure down the road.
Yeah, so I think that, and that was the exact point I wanted to make, is that there's nothing precluding people from getting going in their blue belt. I think it really does depend on it, and it's a self-awareness thing, right? Like, be true on your, you know, with yourself of how comfortable are you with, wanting to pick things up fast? How much time you're going to be able to dedicate to learning? Because it does, you're right, it does start out with real basic stuff of holding the uke and some of the basic strumming patterns and things like that. I would say with the blue, you will probably have an easier time at the beginning if you do at least have some of the basic chord knowledge. So like if you, and I think anybody can pick this up. It's literally a matter of Googling like, basic ukulele chords. So if you know your C, your A minor, your F, your G, your G7, like if you know just those first 3 frets, some of those basic chords, I think that's probably the biggest baseline I would tell people, because you don't spend a lot of time walking everybody through, because you don't do tabs and stuff like that. You have all the basic chord sheets, so like you do provide the PDF for folks that want to have those, but that is not your style of learning or teaching.
Yeah, I teach from a very practical approach, because even like as a student in high school, like I never understood things that were very rocket science. Like, oh wow, like how the hell do you do all that? So for the ukulele, I teach it in a very practical kind of way. So like, yeah, there will be no tabs, but we're gonna put an emphasis on paying attention to fingers, because that's gonna come in handy if you're jamming with someone down the road, or if you're somehow getting to a level where you're doing performances. That's stuff that you're gonna take with you. You're not always gonna have tabs with you, but yeah. Right. So that's one thing we don't have in here.
Yeah, no, and so I think that's for folks and we talk about this. We talk about it on the website that like there's some of that stuff that you ideally have that, but we won't turn anybody away that doesn't have it. Just means that you have to pick it up, and you have the tools are there for you if you need them. But yeah, definitely Andrew's much more of a street learner and street teacher, which for me is great, because I think and actually I'm gonna actually ask you this as a question.
Okay.
Sort of the book learning versus street learning, and this is not meant to compare you with any other particular teacher or anything like that, but I think there's been something interesting to me as I've learned this, of kind of coming at it from ear learning and sort of street learning, like just learning how to just look at it, listen to it, and do it, versus just reading a sheet or reading a book. In how the sound almost comes out differently from folks when you get somebody that has really learned it from more of a practical street learning approach. Talk about that in terms of, sort of how you feel like when you've listened or watched people play, the difference in sound you hear from somebody that has just learned it from tabs on a piece of paper.
Okay, so to start with tabs, the thing is, if you're using tabs, like I always say, use tabs as a supplement. So let's say if you're learning a new piece with some picking, tabs are great. Use it as the training wheels to absorb it up here. But I think sometimes, I've had some students in the past who rely on it, and they're reading it while they're playing. And when you're doing that, you're trying to play here, and you're trying to absorb here and recycle it back out in a way. So that's why it tends to become a little mechanical, because it's not coming from within. And I actually had one of my friends, he was playing. He played a picking piece. It was there, but there was no emotion to it. And so I said, why don't we turn that around? He goes, no, I can't do it. I said, try it. And he was stressing out, but then he played it perfectly, and it sounded amazing. So I said, see, you don't need it, and it's coming. You can feel the soul to it, and that's what music is. It's not meant to be like, it's not meant to sound mechanical. And I always say that it's kind of like, someone giving a speech, right? Or let's say if I was responding, we had a dialogue on a piece of paper. I'm like, okay, let's do it, versus, okay, let's do it. It's two different deliveries. And kind of going back to the practical side of teaching, I think that comes because I'm a performer first.
Hmm.
because there's certain people that just preach it in the classroom and they teach and they don't perform. But for me, I was a performer first, so a lot of these skills is stuff that I needed, like, like the ear training, all the intuition stuff, like that stuff I needed to perform out there. But now I can kind of work backwards and explain that way. So that's why I don't emphasize a lot on like the by the book method. I go because for
Right.
me, even that stuff, understanding that stuff is hard for me. When I open some
Yeah.
of these ukulele books, I'm just like, this is too much math. Me and math never got along. I was always an art guy. So for me and my students, I throw a little bit of math, a little bit of multiplication, all that stuff. For theory, just sprinkle it on there. But other than that, we're going to use our intuition. We're going to use skills that we gain. Use your ear, because those are going to be very strong weapons down the road. And I think that's where my practical side came from. You know.
Yep.
But if I had, if I was strictly a teacher, then I would probably teach very more traditional base. But that practical side comes from, being on the road, going to Europe, going to China, performing, and getting all this experience first, and then kind of filing it up here, and then kind of delivering it back. But yeah, I don't like to obsess over the complicated theory stuff. I shouldn't say theory,
Yeah.
but the way it's presented, I would say.
Right. Right. No, there's theory. Yeah. It's the, you have the tools there for people, like you said. Tabs are there when you're trying to first learn something, or I've taken some time where you maybe don't provide a tab sheet and I've written them down, but I make sure that part of that process of using, whether it's my own made up tab or whatever, is it's using it to memorize
Mm-hmm.
when you get some of the complicated stuff. Like, for example, Andrew mentioned a three finger picking one we do in Blue Belt, which is Can't Help Falling in Love, which was the one that I had to redo. But, I had to write it out because there is a lot of notes in there. And so I wrote it out just so that I could have something to refer to while I was memorizing it. But probably after the second, third, fourth time I was practicing, I got rid of the sheet because I knew, I knew I needed to just learn it, and I did. And it definitely feels different because when you're trying to read it, it's exactly like you said. It's like trying to read a presentation versus presenting to somebody.
Yeah.
And you can tell the difference. You can tell the difference of the transition from note to note by somebody that's reading the tab versus somebody who just feels it and moves through it. And yeah, maybe you make a few more mistakes along the way by getting rid of the tabs earlier on, but it definitely helps.
And it's just more authentic, like I
Yeah.
said, it comes from within. There's soul to it. When people talk about soul in music, like that's how you want to deliver it. It's
Right.
not what you play, it's how you play it. And
Right.
and
Exactly.
that's the main theme going to the whole tab versus memorization. But use it as a supplement. And of course, muscle memory is essential. You got to do so many reps for it to be. I mean, it's like, even to this day, it's funny because it kind of it actually came up when me and my dad were driving, and you know how we're so reliant on a GPS now.
Oh yeah.
So like, like we'll be on the West Coast and we'll be going somewhere, and they're like, "What's the address again?" I'm like, "Dude, this is like our seventh year here." And then I said, "How did you do this?" Because when I was a kid, they used to bust out the map.
Yep. Yep.
And then he's just like, he goes, "Oh, I see what you mean now." And I was just like, it's kind of that same thing of where it's just like, you want
Totally.
that, you want the GPS to be up here, so you gotta have to develop that skill. So you just start memorizing. Okay, you go down this street, you don't have to rely on that, and it's kind of in the way of, I guess you could relate that to tabs. If you don't start memorizing the routes to the house, you're always gonna have to use the GPS. In this case, you're always gonna have to use the tabs unless you memorize it. Yes, it will take time. Yes, it's gonna be a little monotonous, but once that's in your pocket, you remember it forever. And
Oh,
don't
totally.
do too much at once. Like tunnel, and that was my key, is I tunnel vision at maybe one, two, or three songs at a time, and I'll go between the two, but I never did too much.
Actually, and that's a great point you bring up. And one of the things that I loved about, whether it was the self-directed or in the Uke-Jitsu is, you don't you really do break things down into small chunks. That for us, every lesson is one specific thing, and the lesson that you give is what I think the longest one is maybe 3 minutes long ish.
There might be a
They're
longer
not.
one, but yeah, it's not a 10-minute video. It's in chunks.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're only a few minutes long. So you really, it's like, this is the thing you're doing. You repeat it a few times and then you're off and learning it. Yeah, you can go back and rewatch it and all that, but it's not some big amount of stuff that you're having to do at any given time. It's one little tiny piece.
Yeah, so if you have a busy day, you can watch, the strumming videos, and then the videos will be downloadable, so you can throw it on your mobile phone and, take it on the plane whenever you're going. So and then just watch it whenever you have time.
Yeah, man. It's been a lot of fun. I think people are really seeing that those of us that were privileged enough to be part of the beta group, excuse me, have seen it, firsthand. But those that have heard about it, it's clearly, it strikes a note. Not to, have a pun in there, but it really does, resonate with folks. At all different levels at what this is, just because it is something different, it's something unique, and the approach, I think it makes it challenging, but it also makes it a lot of fun, in the way that it's done.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, I can't wait to start on the next level, and I can't wait to see everyone's progress. And again, it all comes down to the mindset. Like you have to be very open to learn, even if it's knowledge you don't think you're gonna use at the moment. But I mean, that's with everything. That's martial art. There's submissions that I learned that I'm probably not gonna use, but need it essentially to progress to the next rank. And this is way easier than jiu-jitsu, by the way. I've been doing jiu-jitsu forever, and I'm still a blue belt. But you can get your blue belt or blue strap in a matter of probably like 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure, that's true. um, so moving on from all the Uke-Jitsu, uh, what's next for you? Like, what else? When I say what else, here you are, you're a performer, you're starting a new academy and everything else, but I know you've got other stuff, you know in the works. So what else you got going on next year, in the next 6-8 months?
Yeah, so this year is more of a woodshed year. Traveling will probably be 2024. So we're actually getting back into the studio for project number 4. And yeah, so I'm actually going tomorrow. We had one session already,
Awesome.
and yeah, hopefully we can get this project out maybe by September. We'll see. But yeah, I'm really gonna try to I'm gonna have a few surprises in there.
Awesome,
Yeah,
awesome.
definitely a different
Yeah,
theme than my first 3.
killer, killer. So project number 4 being your fourth album, obviously.
Yes, yes.
Killer. Well, man, I just want to thank you for jumping on, and diving in on this stuff. It's so great, and I'm so excited about Uke-Jitsu and where it's going to go. I'm excited to see what comes out of this 4th album that you've got coming up. There's a lot of good things coming for Andrew Molina in the next few years here.
Definitely, definitely. Stay tuned, and yeah, Mike, we'll get your purple belt soon.
All right, everybody. Yeah, so I'll say it again here. If you are interested, ukejitsu.com is where you can go, and it'll take you to Andrew's page, where you can see more about and read more about Uke-Jitsu. So check it out, and we will see you guys soon. Thanks for joining, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
All right.